Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily. Coming up, the Warriors lost a game and may have lost Jimmy Butler for Game 3. The Cavs and the Celtics have made it look easy so far. And S and I talk about all the physicality in the playoffs. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, S.
Good morning.
Kind of a bit of a bummer last night. Warriors, Rockets. The Rockets get the win, which is, it's not a bummer. The series is tied up 1 game apiece, going back to the Bay. But late in the first quarter, Jimmy Butler took a hard spill. They diagnosed him in the back with a pelvic contusion, and he missed the rest of the game. S, is there any update on Jimmy Butler?
Yeah, so Anthony Slater mentioned that Jimmy's going to get a MRI tomorrow. He's actually flying back tonight, which is just showing the level of urgency here. The pelvic contusion, like you mentioned, assuming the x-rays were clean at that point. Steve Kerr also said that Jimmy always feels fine. So It's more about pain tolerance at this point and seeing if there's anything else. But, I mean, we'll see, man. Jimmy, pelvic contusions for the Warriors.
They contagious?
Yeah, what a strange thing. Steph, Kuminga, and now Jimmy dealing with pelvic contusions. Just please wear those pads, I
would call that's an effort injury, though. You know what I mean? Like, this is, he was going hard. I mean, that kind of stuff happens. It was a nasty fall.
I by the way, I've seen a lot of talk about, like, was that intentional? I've seen the replays. I don't think it was intentional at all. Yeah. It was just hustle and physicality.
Absolutely.
Right?
We're going to go deep with Kelly Iko after the break on the Rockets side of this. Jalen Green was awesome, especially. We called him out for the game 1. We were saying, hey, this guy is like on some All-NBA ballots. What's he going to do? And
the way he bounced back, man, that's really impressive. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of physicality, the Cavs and Celtics, all right, they're facing a couple teams that like to get physical. And part of that is because their calling card is defense. They can't really score, especially compared to the Cavaliers and Celtics, 2 of the best offenses in basketball. What do you think about how the Miami Heat came out against the Cavs? They jump out to that lead. They were trying to just, hit them in the mouth and hope that they staggered. But, I mean, the Cavs, like, kind of a machine.
Yeah, the Cavs in the first quarter scored 25 points. They scored 25 points in the first 6 minutes of the second quarter. That's the type of offense that this team can be like. They just exploded with their three-point shooting. They throw Ty Jerome
out there, and for some reason, it's just like
guys just get involved. It's incredible to watch. Their bench unit is so fun offensively. They hit a barrage of threes, and that's the way Cleveland gets into it. But you're right. The physicality from Miami was the way that they got back into the game. I'm thinking about Davion Mitchell. It feels like I mentioned him on basically every podcast at this point, but he was awesome in that fourth quarter to get them back at. He did have an on night. And the combination of Haywood Highsmith, who was knocking down his shots and being really physical, Bam Adebayo, always constantly very physical with the way that he plays in the front court. So it's the defensive side of the ball that these teams, both Orlando and Miami, hang their hat on. It's tough to compete.
For Miami, I mean, Cleveland just attacked Kyler Hero, right? Like, I mean, he's a target, and
Darius Garland
it's hard to cover up.
Yeah,
it's hard to cover that up. Let's wait to the Celtics. In case you guys didn't know, Jason Tatum got injured in game 1. He missed game 2. With the bone contusion in his wrist. He was a game time decision. It was actually kind of shocking. I assumed when we heard it was a pain tolerance thing, I really thought he would play, especially given that Joe Mazzulla was yelling at him to get up. And, they kind of have this, this tough mindset.
He's also a guy that doesn't miss games. Like if you look through, he stays healthy.
He's a very tough and resilient player. So I was a little bit surprised. So, he's actually hurting. It makes me think about, ahead to game 3. But when we were coming into the series, you actually mentioned, because we were talking about Jaylen Brown's knee, you said, the Celtics could probably win this without Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown was awesome. And it looks like they could win this without Jason Tatum. So we might see the other guy get a break. But this was probably Orlando's best chance to steal one. And outside of, knocking the snot and blood out of Kristaps Porzingis, they failed. I mean, they're down 0-2. And look, I didn't expect them to win the game, right? But when Tatum was out, I thought they had a chance,
This was their best chance. This was their best opportunity. And I don't know what Tatum's status will be going forward with the series. Who knows how long that bone contusion in his wrist will be. But like ultimately, I think that's more of a question for round 2 and how healthy he looks, because it is on his shooting hand. That's part of like how he's going to be active when you think about facing the Knicks or the Pistons in round 2. And I think that's more of a question for the second round. But for this series, you come back against
the Pistons, there's another physical team.
Totally.
Okay, let me ask you this. Because we know that the playoffs, you get to turn it up a notch. You get to be more handsy, you know.
Totally.
But have we gotten to the point where the playoffs have gotten too physical? I mean, we have, look, the Jimmy Butler injury, it came from physicality. It wasn't a dirty play. Yeah. Obviously, the entire Warriors-Rockets game was physical.
My God, it's a fight.
Stan Van Gundy's on the broadcast essentially saying if he had been allowed to guard Steph Curry like that, they would have beaten the Warriors every single time. And he's right. I mean, he's grabbed around the waist. I mean, Jalen Green had a nice steal on Steph, but he grabs him around the waist. Tari Eason, obviously super physical as a defender. Jason Tatum, the play he gets injured on. I mean,
Kristaps Porzingis, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Is it too physical?
I think too physical is a tough line to like. It's hard to answer the fact that this is too physical, because ultimately we've seen it with every postseason where injuries are a factor. Physicality is a factor. The pace slows down. So teams are playing more half court offense versus transition offense where there's less opportunities to be as physical. I think that plays into the fact that it's physical. The other thing is, if you look at the way some of these teams, and especially referees are officiating these games, it's more about letting things go. Does that actually impact? And this is a good question for you, because I know you've seen it from a coaching perspective. How much does that bleed into what happens on the court? Because we saw it in Rockets Warriors, right? The first 10 minutes of that game, 5 minutes of that game was insanely physical, and it led into tons of scraps in the fourth quarter and hoopla and all that type of stuff. How does it play into the buildup of a game? I
mean, exactly the way you think, right? It's snowballs, right? Frustrations. Right. You get frustration fouls. I mean, I've fouled people like in basketball games, like in high school, when I didn't think I got a foul call. Nikola Jokic was kind of famous for that, right? He would have the frustration
we forgot
fouls.
The Norm Powell, Jamal Murray thing that happened.
I mean, there is a real thing, but honestly, like, I think that I don't think it's too physical at all.
Right.
I do think that there is a lot of stuff that the refs let go. It becomes a different sport when you get to the playoffs, right? So I would just like to get it balanced out. Don't make it so that, a foul is a foul. Let's just call it a foul, instead of saying, if we don't feel like it had that big of an effect and we don't want to stop the flow of the game. I also don't want to stop the flow of the game. But it gets to the point where, like you said, it does spiral kind of out of control.
I do feel like we've seen more chippiness, though. I'm thinking, obviously, the Pacers and Bucks have a long history, but it does feel like any sort of, if a guy falls down, if there's a hard foul, all that type of stuff, they're immediately jumping out. There was a moment in this Magic Celtics game where Al Horford trips on Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and he just springs up. Al Horford, right? Springs up, tries to chase after KCP.
I mean,
there's just a lot of these moments
for times like this, though.
You're right.
We begged for times like this where these guys cared, where they weren't all buddy. Like we have
the rivalries. Actually, that works well.
The rivalries are back. Like these guys, there's on the court bad blood, which is great, I think, for the NBA. Now, there is a finite amount of that you can have before it does spill over, and you got to be careful. And we've seen that with the Rockets this year. We've seen that with the Pistons a couple of times. But we really did beg for this. And now that we've got it, I'm glad it's here. I do wish the officiating would just, let's get it tighter. I don't want these guys getting technicals down the stretch of games.
Totally.
I just think that
I like that they had, Draymond Green and Fred VanVleet, they had that moment where they were face to face. No techs, nothing.
No. Tari Eason got a tech for throwing the towel, which, hey, you know what? Don't throw the towel. The Warriors were about to do that anyway. save yourself the technical and let them throw in the towel when they pull Draymond out.
No, I agree with you. I don't think the physicality is the issue here. I think it comes down to how much are the officials going to allow it?
Right.
And where is that line to your point of, what we're going to decide is physical versus what might end up in some sort of fight or altercation. Right?
Honestly, every series, Lakers Wolves has something.
100%.
Every series except for Thunder Grizzlies, because the Grizzlies they've just rolled over.
Yeah,
they're done.
They're done. It's tough. Yeah.
We're done with this segment. We'll be back after the break with Kelly Iko to talk about Jalen Green's ridiculous night. Well, the Warriors lost Jimmy Butler in the first quarter and then lost the game to the Rockets. Now the series is even 1-1. Here to talk about it, Kelly Iko. He covers the Rockets for us over at The Athletic. Kelly, this series, I think if I was going to pick one word to describe it so far, besides entertaining, it would be physical. Yeah. Extremely physical. We saw, Jimmy Butler obviously it was a hard fall, but nothing dirty, but it was from physical play. Draymond Green, obviously, getting in the mix with Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. And the way they're guarding Steph Curry, physical enough that Stan Van Gundy's calling it out on the broadcast. You were talking to Ime Udoka about this after the game. What did he have to say about it, and what do you think about the physicality?
Yeah, Ime kind of said, this is the identity that the Rockets have built, over the past 2 seasons. This is who they are. They're going to be a team that likes to muck things up. They like to get physical. They enjoy that. They thrive off of it because it allows them to, as long as the officiating is in their favor, it allows them to thrive and be the best version of themselves. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is a team that's pretty up and down offensively, but defensively, if they can get into you physically at the point of attack, they can blow up your actions. Now it becomes a battle of wits. And as you saw it in game 2, technical fouls, flagrant fouls, scuffles, dust-ups. That's kind of the game they enjoy because it takes the air out of the room. And I think for this Rockets team especially, if you look at how they've been able to defend Curry tonight, being able to be aggressive at the point of attack, not letting him get free off of those actions that he's thrived on for over a decade, you can kind of see where the Rockets can find their advantages. Now, obviously, heading into game 3, there are going to be some counters to those, and there's going to be some changes. But I think as far as this series remains chippy and competitive, the Rockets have that in their back pocket.
Yeah, and I think this physical play obviously lends to it's favoring the Rockets, right? I think back to a quote Davion Mitchell had when the Raptors were facing the Cavaliers, and he said, hey, they can't call every foul, and that sort of leans into what this Rockets team likes to do. But they also took care of business offensively. Jalen Green had a massive bounce back game, finished with 38 points, did so efficiently. Post game, he mentioned that he thought maybe in game 1, some of the lights were brighter than he expected, but he bounced back in game 2. What'd you see from Jalen in game 2?
I just saw confidence. Obviously, this was pretty much the biggest game of their lives because if you go down 0-2 to a Warriors team this experienced, you're not getting control back in this series. So obviously, from that perspective alone, Jalen knew he had to bring it, his A game, and he knew that finding a rhythm early, if you've watched Jalen over the years, that's the biggest key to seeing the games he has that are productive. When he gets cooking early, the Rockets kind of feed into him more. They allow him to progress and go through his reads, and they play off of his aggression. And ironically enough, that thing started early defensively. He was locked in on Curry. Yeah. He was in the passing lanes.
2 jump balls in the game.
2 jump balls and just being aggressive as that lead defender. And that kind of fueled his offense because it gives you more juice, more energy to want to score and want to be that go-to guy. And obviously, given the kind of player he is and the kind of person he is, you understand that he's extremely confident in his own abilities. And this is the biggest time of the year where those big-time players show up. So impressive for him to come back and respond after, the last 5 games just where he was averaging, I think, like 5 points a game. And just not looking the kind of scorer that we know him to be. So for him to go and have that kind of performance, it really galvanized the group. And now heading into game 3, they should be full of confidence that they can have a similar type performance.
I'm glad you brought up his defense, because he actually had a complete game. And this gets lost sometimes with Jalen Green, because they don't run things like other teams. So he's not a prototypical number one option. He doesn't stand out as a number one option unless you watch, somewhere north of 60 Rockets games a year, like we have, right? And then you see, okay, he is the number one option. The problem is it falls apart when it doesn't work. But look at his game. I mean, he has 6 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals, the 2 forced jump balls, and also was involved in so many of the traps and switches. I mean, this is the sort of thing that, when you're thinking about a guy, does he develop into the number one guy, like the guy? I mean, how do you see what Jalen Green, over the course of the season, not just tonight, because this guy had a really great year on a team that was the 2 seed in the West. What do you think about the way that this season went for him, and how do you see his career? What's the difference between now and when we started the year?
I think the biggest thing now is trust in the coaching staff. That renewed sense of communication and honesty between those guys, and seeing the deficiencies in his game and where he needed to improve on defensively. Because, early on when Ime first got to Houston, it was a common thing to take him out end of games whenever he needed to get a stop, right? And as a player, your pride and ego is affected by that. If that happens 5, 6, 7 times, because, in this day and age, that becomes a label on you. So what Jalen did is have those hard talks with Ime, have those hard talks with Ben Sullivan, the coaching staff, and figure out exactly what he was doing wrong defensively. And now you're seeing his tendencies are improved. His reaction time is improved. The overall IQ is improved. And because of his size and length and his speed, if he's able to lock in defensively, it really raises the ceiling more than anyone else on that roster because of what he can do offensively as well.
Right.
And given his ceiling, as a potential, A1 guy, these are the games that you have to show that your teammates can trust you in, because this is the first time all of you are going to the playoffs as the young core. It's going to be a lot of, information that's going to be carried over to the offseason that will affect summer decisions, future contracts, stuff like that. It starts now. And credit to Jalen, he's put in the work behind the scenes to become that dependable player, especially on the defensive end. He's worked hard to not be a liability on the end of the floor. And because of that, he's become a positive team defender. And as you saw in game 2, when he's aggressive and he's spearheading that scheme, there's no telling what that team can't do. So I think to kind of forecast his projection, it's really hard to say, because, is this a one-off, or is this, going to be a big moment of
was it a coming out party?
Yeah, right? The coming out party for him. So I think it's a good thing for young players to kind of have those moments like tonight where you kind of feel good about yourself and you understand what it really takes to win at the highest level. It's not just about scoring 30 points 15 times in the month of March. You have to be able to lock in against the best of the best in a slugfest like tonight was.
I honestly think this game, the way that he answered back, was a testament to his ability to get to that level, right? You see you can get to that height now. Now it's about doing it consistently and doing it at the highest level you possibly can. That's a huge step for him in his career too, which is massive. But moving into game 3, we obviously know that there's the Jimmy Butler question in this going to Golden State. What are you looking for, I guess, adjustment-wise from Houston's perspective in this game? Obviously, given the whole Jimmy situation is up in the air too.
And I think Steve Kerr talked about it if Jimmy's out, it really changes everything. They have to rethink everything, which is very true. I think for Houston, given that they've been able to impose their will physically in this year, I think they're a plus 34 or 33 on the rebounds over the last 2 games.
Yeah, massive.
Tonight they had almost 20 more points in the paint than Golden State. And just from the eye test, you're watching a team dominate, them on both ends of the floor with their physical abilities.
Right.
So
they're huge.
I think if there's going to be a counter, I think if there's going to be a counter for Golden State, they did have some success. I mean, you saw the 1-3-1 zone. The Rockets kind of struggled against that. And that goes back to their overall half-court
They've been doing
issues.
that all year, right? Falling apart in fourth quarters as soon as teams throw the zone at them.
Right.
How'd you feel about how they handled Kuminga coming out? Because that was a curveball. Jimmy Butler goes down, and Kuminga, nobody really expected him to play. How'd you feel about how they adjusted when Kuminga hit the floor?
I think initially it kind of took them by surprise because, Kuminga still has that size and speed as an impact player. I think the problem for Kuminga is that because you as a player, you need that rhythm as well. Yeah. So, it's obvious that Steve Kerr doesn't play him for certain reasons in terms of how he fits in with Jimmy and the other guys. And he's kind of like the oddball.
Pat Spencer gave them more problems,
Exactly. So I think it's tough. Like when you have those kind of dark horse type players, it's really hard to scheme for them because you're not sure with this Warriors team who's going to step up now. If Jimmy's not able to play Game 3, who's going to be that next go-to guy? Is it going to be Pods? Is it going to be JK? Is it going to be Buddy? Like
Moses
who's
Moody?
Step up and
if he'll get the shots up, right?
Someone has to do it. So I think if you were to look at it in a vacuum, it has to be Kuminga, but who knows to see how they actually scheme.
I mean, look, he had a good season against the Rockets. I mean, he had some of his highest scoring output games against the Rockets, and physically, I think he matches up pretty well. And we were talking, we could go on and on and on. We've already hit this a dozen times, but Kelly, thank you so much for hanging out. Look forward to seeing what you're writing ahead of Game 3, and we'll see what happens. This series is so good. This is fun.
Yes,
the physicality, I'm into it. That's going to do it for the show, folks. For Kelly Iko and Es Baraheni, I'm Dave DuFour, and this has been the NBA Daily. Thanks for waking up with us.